everyone, for staying with us, and welcome back. President Bola Tinubu yesterday met with service chiefs for the very first time since his assumption into office. He was demanding the security agencies to strengthen coordination and not work at cross purposes. At the end of that meeting, the president disclosed his own philosophy towards dealing with security issues, which is the adoption of contemporary security measures to advance the country's security functions. Take a listen to the summary of what was discussed from the NSA.
He has made it very, very clear that all the security agencies must comply with the demands of coordination, with the demands of frequent consultations, and also timely reports which must be acted on. He's going to embark on a lot of reforms in terms of our security architecture. He's going to take a closer look at our misfortunes in the maritime domain, focusing particularly on the issues of oil theft. That he is not going to tolerate. Wherever the problem is coming from, it must be crushed as soon as possible. He's already mandated the security agencies to come up with a blueprint.
Thank you so much, everyone. You heard the NSA. Let's get some perspectives to these, everyone. I'm being joined by Mr. Dr. Kabiru Adamu. He's a security consultant and CEO of Beacon Consulting. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
My pleasure, Sean.
President Tinubu is not a general, but it looks to me that he's spoken like one in the area. Crush, deal, coordinate. Those are words that will look like someone who understands the dynamics of security. What are your impressions of his very first outing with the service chiefs?
So, given the background of what he has released as his manifesto, which is the renewed hope, inside which he listed 7 elements and called them agenda, and then given the speech that the president gave in his inaugural statement, where he listed security to be of primary importance and then listed a couple of things he would do, I think one can conclusively say he's actually walking the talk. Everything the National Security Advisor just mentioned are things that were contained in that manifesto and that were part of the statement he made when he told Nigerians that he was going to prioritize security. So to that extent, one is happy to hear that. What I think remains is the methodology. It's easy to make such statements, but it will be very important as an example to say these are the methodologies that I intend to achieve all of these objectives. So it will be very important in the coming days to have a sense of several things, those that would drive the leadership of the security organizations, issues that prevented the immediate past administration from achieving some of the set objectives, because let's not forget, security was the primary component of the focus areas for the immediate past administration. So it will be very interesting over these first periods to listen to.
It's interesting that the old guard are still on hand. Then, in fact, the Minister of Defense was still on parade. The National Security Advisor under President Buhari is still on guard and went there for that meeting. So he's using the same structure as President Buhari is using as of now. But it does look like he mentioned something very critical, which has been somewhat a perennial problem of security in Nigeria, which is coordination. How much of a problem is that? And from the angle he's coming from, in saying that there must be coordination, from what you understand, what insight can you give us on that?
So if you look at the national security structure, it is quite interesting that to achieve coordination with the existing national security architecture will be a little bit difficult. And so the president is desirous of achieving coordination, but I think what is even more important is to look at that structure and identify the challenges to coordination within that structure. So as an example, we have, at the last count, I think about 8 or 9 different organizations within the national security structure that have coordinating elements. The one that is recognized by virtually everyone is the Office of the National Security Advisor. Now, that office is the coordinating element within the national security structure. But aside from that office, you have several ministers that also have that coordinating element. You mentioned the Minister of Defense, you have the Minister of Interior, you have the Minister of Police Affairs. And then,
sorry, I like my producer to put up that image of what Mr. Kabir Adamu has tried to draw up in a diagram so our viewers can have an understanding of how this structure works. That's exactly what you're making reference to. Please go ahead.
Exactly. So then you also have the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and to an extent, the Chief of
Staff. So he's also involved
in
the coordination of security.
Exactly. He calls for the meetings because we also need to talk about the roles of the consuls. There are several consuls that have responsibility for security. The National Defense Council, the National Security Council, National Police Council. And then to an extent, in fact, in this country at a point, the National Economic Council decided on an issue that affected security. Remember during the NSAS, it was the National Economic Council that made that decision. I'm not sure how and why, but then it did that. So to what extent, for instance, do these consuls also contribute to security? Point I'm trying to make is that there are structures that have been made available under the Constitution to provide for security. Now, to what extent are we actually following those provisions? And that now makes the question of coordination extremely difficult. If we pick one element of security, which is policing, it would surprise you and of course most of our viewers to discover that several policing agencies are spread across different ministries. If you use the police itself under the Ministry of Police, but then to an extent the EFCC that has a responsibility, it's under the presidency, or to an extent Ministry of Justice. And then there are several others, NDLEA, that I'm not sure where NDLEA is. I think it's under the Ministry of the Presidency at some point. So in that convoluted environment, it makes coordination extremely difficult. So we need to look at that structure, reduce this convoluted...
Would you say that we should break all of this down and have a unified... I mean, what works in the United States, for example, after the 9/11? There seems to be a house cleaning of some sort in the United States after that terror attack happened.
Well, first off, there was, call it an audit, to identify what were the challenges. First off, there was no sharing of intelligence among the several organizations. They are operating in silos. So they addressed that by creating a central pool, an intelligence fusion pool. And I think we're also discussing that at that moment. But apart from that, there were also gaps that were identified. Do we have gaps at the moment? We do have gaps. Between the federal and state governments, there are huge gaps.
If the DSS can go and occupy the EFCC office saying that that is their own office, that is more than a gap. That is more like a gaffe.
Well,
within, pun not intended.
Yeah,
anyways.
but I mean that there are several ramifications of that.
But the question is that these are federal government entities. These are somewhat kind of security agencies. If there are problems, it doesn't have to come into the public domain resolving these kind of issues. And these are the issues that people say, these are sister agencies in any case.
So, I'll be interested as an example, the supervisory bodies for these organizations, what actions have they taken to make sure, for instance, it could be just a query. There are leadership positions at the state level for these organizations. At the last count, we were told that the matter was even in court. So if the matter was in court, why should they act in the manner that they acted? And then have we taken any corrective actions in terms of querying the individuals that were concerned? And then even if, for instance, that goes beyond that, the National Assembly, which has a responsibility for oversight function. So Shehu, the point I'm making is that there are provisions within our Constitution for dealing with virtually everything. And if you were able to put up that structure, you would have seen that the structure allows for coordination if only we're going to follow the structure. However, the challenge remains that even at the coordination element, there are different levels, and that we need to also look at the mandate for each of those levels. Part of the discussion under the President Buhari administration is the role of the Office of the National Security Advisor. Clearly, the Constitution says the role of that office is advisory. But there is an argument by some people that that office has assumed operational powers, as an example. So when, for instance, the counter-terrorism unit is placed under that office, the commission for mopping up small arms and light weapons is placed under that office, some elements within the national security structure are a little bit uncomfortable about that, because those are operational powers that that office is assuming when its mandate is clearly advisory. So these are the things.
So there are those who argue that that office, for example, has been manned sometimes by the military. And some of our problems internally and locally are more or less policing. And there are those who have argued, that those who are of the school of thought, that the NSA office should be someone from the intelligence or the policing circle. What are your views on that?
So if you look at the structure that I put up, the military only occupies at best 5 out of about 29 of those several structures. Point I'm trying to make is that the entire security paradigm, the security sector, defense, yes, is important, but it is a minute part of the security architecture. And in our own case, our challenges are internal security matters. So the best suited persons to address those internal security matters are persons who understand internal security.
Instead of policing and civil engagement.
Exactly. And that either falls in the realm of the police or the intelligence organizations. No doubt the military is absolutely required. It's important. It's a critical component of that national security architecture.
But those who are, I've heard some experts, apologies, I've heard some experts say, look, we cannot, that the military are trained to use force. And at the moment, Nigeria is not facing any imminent threat to our external or to our territorial, the integrity of the territory of Nigeria. And as such, our major problem are internal. Squabbles within one ethnic, farmer, herders, clash, and these are something that you can actually handle without actually shooting one bullet. And so it needs a lot of research and application of some civil engagement.
Definitely, and if you notice, of recent politicians have brought in non-kinetic warfare, and that's what they're actually speaking about. There is a realization, even among the political class, that this non-kinetic or soft power is actually required. But I don't want, to leave here with the impression that kinetic power is not required.
Needed.
It is needed, because the kind of threats we face, the nature of the weaponry that the threat elements are using are military-grade weapons. When we have threat elements that are carrying, surface-to-air, RPGs and others, then we really need military capacity. But the point is that military should be part of a national security arrangement. And if you look at that national security arrangement, the military represents only, like I said, 4 out of about 29. And so the coordinating element left, if I would advise, I would say it's best suited for an internal security expertise that understands internal security, that is able to use soft power to address grievances and the other root causes that lead to security. Intelligence, as an example, it's vital and absolutely important to addressing national security challenges.
And so there are those who say that if the president needs to get things right, the kind of person that he appoints, he's made a first few appointments there, the SGF, and the issue of regional concentration also was put in place. The North Central, the agitation, president from Southwest, the vice president from the Northeast. Now we have a North Central person as the SGF. That the economy and the security, it cannot afford to play politics with it. It has to use professionals.
I agree totally. Professionals who understand the dynamics that drive insecurity in Nigeria. As an example, the twin issues of ethnicity and religion, and then the several other drivers of insecurity, the socio-economic challenges, climate change, and the lack of adaptability. And frankly, yes, we have a crop of military officers that are well-trained And frankly, that establishment represents probably one of the most elitist organizations within the country. But are they suited for internal security issues? I don't think so. Do they have a role to play within that? Yes, they do have a role to play. And frankly, we've tried them for how many years now? The last few appointments in the Office of the National Security Advisor have all been military. And look at where we are today. So why don't we look at something else and then ensure for it they are carried along and they have a place, but then let's give the other, expertise a chance to play. So yes, I agree totally that it's time perhaps that we look at either from the policing, sector or the intelligence sector.
The agitation has been state policing, community policing, and that these are the areas. The House of Reps under Femba Jabiamila came up with the idea and saying that they organized a summit and came forward with the idea that there is a need for a more intelligent manner in which to approach this insecurity in the nation. If President Tinubu is watching right now, in terms of, because appointments is imminent, so if you are going to advise him right now about the kind of NSA he needs to appoint, what would you be saying to him?
Number one, a professional with both academic and then experience in the area of national security, who understands the requirement of modern security. And data, in this instance, is absolutely important. Not somebody who is not afraid to embrace data, who understands that intelligence in modern security sector is really not about just human intelligence, but also using several components. AI, as an example, is quite prominent at the moment. The number two is the person's ability to manage and understand the diversity that Nigeria represents. And then number three is also the charisma of that individual. We've had in the past persons who occupied that office, because of their charisma, they were able to address and manage security challenges before even the president was involved. So now, and the last one is the ability of that person to coordinate elements within the national security.
Coordination is very key. Thank you so much indeed. I mean, of course, if you were, I've been experiencing a problem and using a similar style, and the problem persists, there's a need to rethink that strategy. Thank you so much, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, for your time tonight. Security consultant.
Thank you for having me.
And the CEO of Beacon Consulting. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. But that's our show this Friday. I'll see you again on Sunday at 8 p.m. Bye for now.